Hello and welcome to another episode of Unauthorized Disclosure. I'm one of your hosts, Drania Kalik, and as you can see, I'm joined by the show's other host, Kevin Costola. Hey, Kevin.
Hey, it's good to be here.
It's good to be back. It's our first show of 2021, right? Yeah,
Yeah. hmm
right, because we took a couple weeks off, and the year got started as crazy as last year did, I would say, in some different ways. And our first guest of the year is journalist and author of Surveillance Valley, Yasha Levine. Yasha, it's really good to have you back.
Thanks. All right. Well, I didn't realize I was number one here.
You're number one, man, in our hearts at
All
Unauthorized
right.
Disclosure.
Woohoo.
so
Thanks for having me on.
I
Yep.
I'm really excited to talk to you about all of the insanity in the aftermath of this Capitol riot last week,
Oh, yeah.
especially in respect to the role of tech giants and these Silicon Valley oligarchs shutting down accounts. And we can get to that, but I kind of wanted to first, since we haven't had a show yet this year, talk a little bit about what happened at the Capitol, because on a personal note, like I think when I was watching it happen, um, what I was seeing was these like ridiculous looking crazy people in costumes, like failing to take the Capitol over. And it was kind of like it just looked silly and theatrical. And it's not until I think a few days after that it really became clear, at least to me, how serious it was what happened, in the sense that like this was an actual lynch mob encouraged by the Republican Party to storm the Capitol to try and overturn an election, um, with collusion of sitting members of Congress. Like we're hearing now, I don't know why it took like so many days, but you're hearing these sort of like personal testimonies one after another trickle out from various members of Congress who are Democrats, say that like they saw their colleagues and their staffers letting these people inside entrances, taking them on like reconnaissance tours the day before so they could get a layout of the Capitol from the inside. Um, it just seems so batshit. I'm like, how come no one, like, how are these people not in jail? Like, it just gets crazy to happen. So I guess saying all that, Yasha, like,
Hmm.
what was your
Oh,
take watching what happened? Do you agree with what I just said? Maybe you have a different take on what happened. But what was your take when you were
yeah.
watching it happen? And now that we've kind of learned more information about what took place, what's your take on it now? And before you answer that, I also want to say one last thing about what did happen is I think it'll be interesting to watch how Joe Biden responds, because I think he's still going to come to office saying he wants to work with the Republicans who tried to overthrow
Yeah.
or tried to overturn his presidency, which is like the irony of it all is how spineless and stupid Democrats are. But anyways,
Yeah.
your
No,
turn.
I mean, I don't know. In the interest of full disclosure here, I mean, I'm completely. I don't know about you or people who are listening. I've completely overdosed on crisis content. Like
Yeah.
I mean, my mind, like just just it just like curls up in a fetal position, anytime something happens now, because I'm over it, like just been kind of bombarded with crisis after crisis after crisis, and all of us are kind of sitting in our homes, locked down, and just sort of addicted to the internet and addicted to social media. That yeah, I think like a lot of people, I kind of, when I was watching this, I mean, it looked serious, but I definitely didn't understand the kind of the what was going on behind the scenes and what led up to this, and all the different sort of premeditated aspects of this kind of some disorganized and chaotic and kind of just clown show a coup attempt, right? So I've been kind of also I've been obviously reading what's going on and trying to stay on top of it, but I'm not the person to ask about what has exactly happened and what are the deals. But I agree with you, and it seems much more like a real coup attempt, even though it was totally disorganized. There wasn't like a central planning. There wasn't even a real uh, plan for what to do if you took power or whatever, and like that just uh, occupying a building, and maybe taking some people hostage isn't the same thing as um, actually taking power in this vast imperial capital. And it's kind of interesting, but it is so. I totally agree with you. I mean, I think as time goes on, we're learning, that this was a lot more serious than it had appeared initially. Um, because initially it just looked like a bunch of people broke away from the rally, right, and kind of just made their way to the Capitol building and kind of broke their way in. Um, so yeah, I totally agree with you on that. And I don't know, I don't know. I mean, you know, like putting the people in jail and kind of hunting for these people is, I guess I'm always like, hesitant to side with law enforcement or to call for more law enforcement and to call a crackdown
Especially
on
since
people.
they
But
were, like, involved, right? Like,
yeah,
since
I
they
mean,
were, like, partly involved.
exactly. So they're partly involved, and if you're like, and I'm not even sure that I mean, it's like in a way it doesn't even matter what we think because that whole machine is just going to kind of grind in under
Right.
its own inertia and its own momentum rather, and like just do what it wants to do. So I'm not sure empowering these sort of national security appendages and sort of police state appendages is a good thing, but it's going to happen. It's going to happen. There's going to be crackdowns. There's going to be crackdowns on political uh, speech, on speech in general, and we're seeing already on the internet what's happening with social media platforms, sort of like taking out a sitting president, which I think you know it's such a huge thing. I never thought that Facebook or Twitter.
All right, so I apologize for the hiccup, everyone who's watching the show, but we'll just say that the people in Surveillance Valley were disrupting our ability to have this conversation. And you were talking about how shocked you were, stunned that Donald Trump was banned from Twitter, and just your reaction generally to that. So I think we should have you wrap up your thoughts before we go into any other area or make any other points about the riot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure where I got cut off, but all I was trying to say is that, yeah, I was just shocked that Trump was cut off by these two corporations, Facebook and Twitter, and banned for life, essentially. To do that to a sitting president, I think was a step that I did not expect him to take while he's in office. Um, and I think it's going to have serious ramifications for the politics of technology and politics of Silicon Valley in ways that I think people are not really considering at this moment, when there are just increasing calls for more censorship and for more unilateral sort of control of speech by these corporations. So I was surprised. I was to me it was kind of on par with the storming of the Capitol, the cutting off of Donald Trump. I mean, both of these events are going to have ramifications in serious ways. Yeah.
It's interesting because I think that um this is me speculating because I'm not like in the inner circles of the ruling class, but it
You
seems
had
to
us
me that
fooled.
they
Yeah.
I know. Shocking. It seems to me though that they were the government and like ruling elites were pretty rattled and still are by what happened. This was a huge embarrassment for America, right?
Hmm.
Because we're supposed to be this like stable democracy, whatever that means, that projects this kind of like strength and stability around the world. And this showed that, I mean, you had a bunch of rioters storm the Capitol and like literally go into the seat of power where
Yeah.
legislators do their job, and had legislators hiding, and you had all these these media personalities being like, "Oh my god, I can't believe I'm in America, not Baghdad right now. Like this is so crazy," and saying stupid things like that. But it really did show like they were all really really rattled, and now you have all
Of
these
course.
like bankers and CEOs and companies, literally like divesting from Trump and cutting ties with him. Because this just like, I think for them it took it too far because it's going to have lasting damage
Yeah.
on America and its image around the world, which is so important to these people.
No,
But
it's interesting
well,
because because if you want to finish your thought, sorry, I didn't mean to
I
interrupt you.
wanted to tie this in. No, I wanted to tie this in because it goes back to the tech thing. Like, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But it goes back to the like sort of tech oligarchs deciding to ban Trump. It's
Yeah.
almost like a couple of things were happening. Of course, they're going to use this, this new power of theirs. They can censor a sitting president. It kind of means they're actually the ones in charge, which is creepy.
Hmm.
But it also kind of shows that they just don't have a handle on anything.
No, it's
Like,
totally, yes. It shows a weakness and it shows exactly, but it also shows a threat to like potentially other sectors of the economy, other because it's not like there's a one ruling clan or something or one ruling party in America. There's just these sort of competing business interests. They have obviously a lot of their interests overlap in most things, but still there's like there's a at least I think the you know, the kind of the ruling idea of America is that you have these competing interests, and that no one interest has you know, kind of unilateral power over anyone else, right? There's this kind of marketplace, basically an oligarchy, but one in which is able to compete with itself.
A democratic oligarchy.
Exactly, a democratic oligarchy. It's the best form of government. And so in a way, you know, these companies, these like kind of these, I mean, it's funny. It's like you have like, okay, so yeah, like Jack Dorsey, who's like this weird dude, you know, like who does these like multi-hour meditation walks, you know, like he commutes to work on foot and does these sort of walking meditations. He like, you know, he kind of he fasts, you know, to like hallucinate and to get kind of like to you know, to enter like to enter a trance. Then you have like Mark Zuckerberg, who is this kind of computer dweeb, who's suddenly this guy who's overseeing, you know, the communication system of the world. And like they're, you know, they're part of the elite obviously now, but they're kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, you know, they're not part of the traditional elite. This is just they're like the first generation of these tech oligarchs that emerged, right? And suddenly they have all this power to do what they want. And even if like big chunks of the elite agree with what they're doing, you know, and like maybe censoring Trump or like trying to taper down the spread of this conspiracy theory and the sort of conspiracy theory fueled coup that's also has, you know, roots in a lot of sort of establishment politics on the right. Maybe they agree with it, but I still think it's like, I don't know, it's pretty alarming. If I was an oligarch, I would not like this. You know, maybe I would, even if I supported it, you know, this one time, I would not like. It'd be like a wake up call for me about like what the power that these companies have. I mean, because what's stopping them from taking offline, I don't know, like Cato Institute or the Heritage Foundation, you know, like imagine cutting
Well,
off
I wouldn't mind that.
no, no, they don't do that. And they don't do that. And of course, you know, a lot of this coup, you know, this coup is like the Tea Party 2.0. It's like the Tea Party in the age of social media and like sort of, you know, in the pandemic age and an age of a kind of a more of a decentralized movement. But it's like I see, because I covered the Tea Party and, you know, how it was actually an AstroTurf movement that began as an AstroTurf movement funded by Charles Koch, you know, up until pretty recently one of the richest people in America. And so, I mean, the same forces that funded the Tea Party movement and the sort of opposition to Obama in his first term, and the opposition to bailing people out after the financial collapse. You know, I see echoes of this in QAnon and kind of the organizations and the people and the surrounding this conspiracy theory, right? And so, like, this is kind of this thing isn't like something that came from, you know, a void, and it can be sort of like, you can't just like, you know, blow up that like wormhole and like shut this alien invasion off, right? I mean, it comes very much from American society and big chunk of the American elite. The you know, the movements that led to this coup, to this failed coup. And so I don't know, you know, so what I'm kind of going on a rant here, but what I'm just want to say is that like it's a pretty big thing. I don't know, and I'm just curious, I'm, you know, as we're all just sort of passive bystanders in all of this, I'm curious to see how it'll play out among the elite itself, you know, and whether or not there'll be more calls to regulate Facebook and sort of like define clear limits, you know, over their kind of the censorship power. And I'm almost guaranteeing that whatever these limits are going to be imposed, if they are going to be imposed, and when they will be imposed, they're not going to favor a kind of a, you know, an open society or a, you know, they're not going to favor the left in any sort of way. They're gonna you know, like favor national security and favor entrenched political interests and kind of favor the oligarchy. And I'm just curious how that's going to be kind of played out and what that legislation will actually look like when it comes out, you know, in the near future. I predict that. Yeah.
Well, that seems like a pretty fair prediction, and I wonder if you see that inevitably there's going to be a public-private partnership where essentially, you know, maybe similar to what we saw with the surveillance that was supposed to be for fighting the war on terrorism. You know, basically they've been pretty much joined at the hip working together with the government invited into corporate boardrooms, with corporate executives invited into the highest echelons of the security state. I mean, is that what we can expect to you as far as the censorship regime would be going forward? Because it seems like the complaint now is you're doing this on impulse. You're doing this, I know you claim that you have these guidelines that you have to enforce, like glorification of violence, for example, is what they said Donald Trump did. But they're not doing this along the way. Like at some point, everyone who is a reasonable person looks at Donald Trump's feed and says glorification of violence. You could have purged him a long time ago.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't really make sense to the average person who isn't in the ruling class. And so essentially, they're going to have to come up with a criteria. And if we don't want tech companies to be in charge, it just seems, since we're not going to nationalize them, it's going to be a public-private partnership.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, and that private-public, you make a very good point, and I think it's 100% right. That's going to happen, and it already exists on some level. I mean, just the, I mean, I don't have to explain this to you, Aranya. I mean, you've been on like the kind of you've been fighting this for years now. I mean, basically a partnership between the Atlantic Council and Facebook, where the Atlantic Council, which is a NATO think tank, a kind of privatized, extension of NATO, that sets policy and has and it doesn't all this kind of like public-private influencing on different levels. I mean, they have a seat at the table in regards to Facebook about what's to check the veracity of posts.
In
and
fact,
to sort of like
Facebook actually helps fund them too, which is funny.
yeah, exactly. In a huge way. Actually, one of the main funders of the Atlantic Council, as far as we know, right at this point, is Facebook. And so, and the Atlantic Council is just one of the sort of the big name. Everyone knows what it is, but there are a bunch of other ones that are always like rebranding themselves, and there are a bunch of these kind of activists who have been in the State Department, who have been in the NSA, who have been in various parts of the national security state, and they kind of cycle through these disinformation initiatives, through these kind of almost like pop-up startups, that are trying to like fight disinformation, and they're very well embedded into the fabric of Silicon Valley at this point. And for the most part, they've been geared towards foreign policy, right, and national security stuff. Outward facing, but I think that's going to increase with kind of inward facing kind of schemes and inward facing information in the same kind of way. But I totally agree with you. There's going to be I mean, look, Facebook is already an extension to some degree of the government, or the government is an extension of Facebook. I don't know which way, you turn it. But that's going to deepen, and it's going to deepen on it, and it's kind of in the domestic sphere rather than just the foreign policy sphere, for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because you had this rhetorical backlash from European officials about the banning of Trump from Twitter. Like Angela Merkel, the EU commissioner, whose name I can't remember because it's something I don't remember if I can pronounce it. They have weird names. And then a couple of French ministers, people who don't necessarily like Trump and, are sort of like, liberal types, at least in American context, liberal, that are coming out against this. But their argument seems to be that they don't like these tech giants for the fact that they're monopolies, which is a good. They shouldn't like them because they're monopolies. But then they think, they want this. If anybody's going to be regulating speech, it should be the government. In their mind, that's their argument, and they've got like legislation. I mean, Europe does actually have state limits on free speech depending on the country, right? Like the U.S. doesn't have. Like I think Nazi symbols and stuff like that, right, are banned. But this brings me to another question, because I don't really know how to respond to this. Because people keep making the argument this is a conversation we're happening among people who would consider themselves left, and then some liberals, but like that you should deplatform fascists, you should deplatform Nazis. We shouldn't want them communicating and planning things online, right? How do you respond to that? Because it's something that I kind of struggle with, in the sense that if I was in charge, or if like an actual leftist was in charge, then yes, I'd want to deplatform all the Nazis and fascists. Yeah, for sure. But I'm not in charge, right?
I mean, look, it's a problem, because we have these conversations what should and should be done, and we're discussing things on like policy level, and especially policy level, not even in the government, but in private corporations.
Mm-hmm.
And which I think is kind of absurd because, first of all, we have no power to influence. I mean, almost no power to influence things on a government level, on the federal level, for sure. But
Mm-hmm.
like to influence, to put pressure on these corporations to censor people, and like to appeal to these oligarchs to like be better stewards of
Like AOC
speech,
does.
speech and political kind of content, and just the politics of of you know of in America. I mean, that's basically what there's what they're being asked to do, is to be stewards of politics, and of acceptable political speech and acceptable political discourse. I mean, it seems like when you have a fascist who is like wearing some Auschwitz sweatshirt or whatever, like when that's the when that's the case, yeah, it seems like it's a no-brainer. Yeah, you should definitely do it. But then they're just they're a fringe case, and what you're really doing is really showing the weakness and the lack of power that we have
Right.
over these things. And so I kind of take a neutral position on this, because like who am I to, what am I going to appeal to Zuckerberg to be a better oligarch? I mean, it's just to me it's ridiculous. It's like we're going to call on these people to be better oligarchs and to be better stewards, to basically run their manor, in a better, more responsible fucking way. I mean, it's absurd. So my position on it is I don't have a position on it really, because what kind of position is it to call on your master to treat, to take even a more an active part in sort of running the politics of this country, So it's a bizarre position, and again, like I said, it shows just how weak democracy is in America, and how little power people have over sort of the most important parts of our society, which is the communication system and the platforms and the places that we use to communicate with each other. And that's what this conversation shows me more than anything else, rather than deplatforming fascists or not. I mean, look, Facebook and Google and whatever, and Twitter and all these companies and Amazon, you can go down the line. I mean, they're gonna do what they think is best for the interests of their own corporate values, and the sort of values of their shareholders, right? I mean, it's basically what they're going to do. We're going to do what's best for Amazon. They're going to do what's best for Google. They're going to do what's best for Twitter. They're going to do what's best for Facebook. And if and that includes a kind of probably a complex equation and complex sort of strategizing about like what are the pro and cons of doing these things. And so they respond to the political, to the cultural pressures, right, to the sort of PR pressures that are put on them, and they act accordingly. I mean, sometimes maybe they may, in the end, they might make the wrong decision, like with this banning of Trump. Who knows how it'll backfire. But at the moment they make these decisions, and so that's how they operate. So like to expect them to operate in any other kind of way, for them to have like some kind of political conscience, and yeah, I'm not even sure what that would mean in the case of a giant corporation that just seeks to monopolize everything and suck up as much power and wealth as possible. Like I don't know what that even means for them. So I find these calls kind of, I mean, on the one hand, they're seductive, right? Because I mean, Zuckerberg does seem like maybe a better guy than the Nazi who wants to put all what's left of the Jews into ovens, but at the same time, it's like that he is an expression of a serious problem in American politics, and a crucial kind of component in all the problems that America is facing right now. And so it's like asking one problem to fix another problem. We live in a very fucked up age where we have no power, and so that's what we do now. We ask our overlords to be better overlords. It's pretty fucking fucked up. I don't know what to say.
And
Yeah.
I think the example that you have put out of the Camp Auschwitz short is a really good one, because when you look at surveillance, typically when people who claim to care about civil liberties or privacy rights, when they are the weakest is when they're faced with what? Child pornography cases.
Yes.
Cases involving sexual predators. And there's all manner of shit that our national security agencies have been able to win as powers by saying they have to go after people who are posting
Yeah.
the disgusting photos and videos on the web. And it just seems like people could think of speech and the way censorship is being applied in that way, because like the fascists that people want to remove, yeah, they're the child predators in this example. Like
Yes.
they're the child predators in this example.
They're the pedophiles, basically. Yeah, they're like yeah. The edge case, of like of what limited of what's the limit of acceptable behavior or speech. Yeah.
I think there's also just too much emphasis, and maybe this is naive on my part, but I think there's too much emphasis on the role that social media plays. Like, social media certainly can aggravate the problems that already exist in society, and it is used as a tool to organize. That's true. But like, fascists existed before social media. Like, it's like the idea that we're having these problems because of social media just doesn't add up to me.
Yeah.
And it's also like an easy out. It's like an easy out for not then having to actually look at the real root for why there's like crazy QAnon conspiracies exploding
Hmm.
during like a pandemic that's economically destroyed the country. Like,
Yep.
people are in positions. I'm not saying that all these people are doing economically poorly, but when you see society feeling like it might be crumbling around you, it's really seductive to look to crazy conspiracies. Um, and
Yep.
the right has a huge, very well funded media ecosystem that offers these really hateful and like batshit narratives that it's really hard to compete with. The left isn't even on
Yeah.
the same playing field as these people. Like, there, and then there's like, so to me, it just seems like by saying, obviously Facebook and Twitter are big problems for many reasons, but by saying because that this is why we have these problems and that's why we need to censor speech is the argument being made, and that
Yeah.
seems like nonsense to me. And like, these companies are these huge monopolies, and I'm so sick of this argument. It's like, well, Facebook and Twitter are private companies, and you don't have to be on them. Go start your own social media company. It's like, you can't.
Yeah.
Like, they're monopolies, and like the whole situation with Parler was really interesting because it looked to me like, I mean, Parler's funded by like right wingers. I'm not like I don't like love Parler and think it's great, but like, there's crazy people saying crazy shit and conspiracy theories and right wing stuff and fascist things on Twitter and Facebook too.
Yeah.
To me, it looked like Twitter and Facebook and Amazon and Google came together to destroy competitor, which
Yeah.
I think proves that you can't start your own social media company and be successful in this kind of monopolistic world.
No, exactly. And because yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it's the monopoly is like, ghost. It's like, oh, you don't like you don't like these companies. It's like, go start your own internet service provider. Go start your own data hosting cloud company. Go start your own, um, yeah, like go start your own smartphone company, because like and build your own ecosystem so you can have whatever apps you want on there. Like it's like, oh, then it's like, well, you don't like it, go start your own oil company, go start your own, like it
Go
can
start
go
your own
further.
bank.
Yeah, start your own rock crushing company that you can build some roads. I mean, it's like the whole thing is just it's ridiculous, obviously, because we live in this society and we have that argument can be sort of you can continue that argument into total absurdity. But yeah, I agree. Look, I mean, it's um I don't know, I'll tell you this though. I mean, I'm in a way my kind of the accelerationist in me, and the kind of but actually more seriously, I actually, it's serious because I think social media as a problem, is problematic. The sort of these global social media companies are kind of a problem, I think, for politics, because it helps give people the illusion that they're connected and that they have this power and that they're having these conversations like you and I are now, and like we can be on Twitter and sort of connect with people from all over the world and feel like we're part of something big, and then we step outside of that reality, and around us where we live, in our neighborhoods, on our street, in our towns, like there's nothing, and in a way, like the way that I see it, politics has to kind of start from your lived reality, like their physical lived reality, the people around you, the people in your neighborhood, your neighbors, city governments, county governments, state governments, that kind of stuff, right? And if there's no politics there, you don't really have much of a politics at all in America, And social media kind of helps perpetuate this kind of fantasy that something exists, and so I don't know. To me, it's like the faster these platforms cancel all of us, maybe the better it'll be for politics, and the better it'll be for left politics, because people actually have to get together. No, but I'm actually saying this quite seriously, because I think part of the problem it's part of the problem with these platforms is that they're huge. They take up a huge amount of people's attention, and a huge amount of our time. And if in reality, like we have no power there, right? We can be canceled at any moment. We can be deplatformed. We can be booted off the platform. We can lose, you can lose your revenue stream. You can lose your business immediately, and with no warning, with no recourse. And so we kind of live on these platforms at the whim of our tech overlords, and so it's like a nice fantasy while it can last, but like it has no like basis in reality almost. I don't know. And so yeah.
I think a good actual example of what you're describing, and I know that you had a different criticism of the whole force the vote thing.
Yes.
And you're welcome to actually like elaborate on that, but you're talking about how this stuff online doesn't translate into reality. And I think that with the whole force the vote thing, it was basically all online.
Yes.
It was all like on YouTube. It was different like media personalities on YouTube bickering with each other, and like kind of taking pot shots at each other. It got big on Twitter. I think people at one point started organizing on a Slack. And then when it came time to actually meet in person, it was pretty like disheartening to see like a dozen people.
Yeah.
Like it was a big story. It was dominating. It was like, trending on Twitter for like
for like and people just couldn't shut up about it for like a month. It's just,
And then
it's still being talked about. Yeah.
yeah. When it came time to like be on the ground about it, it's
no one
like
there. Yeah.
Right. And that's not to say like people don't want universal health care. It was more, I think, just a reflection of like what you're saying is what happens online does not necessarily translate into real life, and it can't replace real life organizing, which is what we're lacking.
Yeah. And the same thing with like, the Bernie Sanders movement, like it was sort of like it was able to use, it wouldn't have been able, Bernie Sanders in the form that it took, like his candidacy in the form that it took, last election and the previous one before that, like wouldn't have been, wouldn't really have existed without social media, without Facebook, right? Without the ability to basically organize, and get all these people and have them, donate little bits of money to him and really fund his campaign, but also organize in this kind of ad hoc, decentralized way. And then you could see like when his candidacy disappeared or ended, like that movement like kind of evaporated. I know there's like little pockets of activists that got together because of it and met on the campaigns and like, they launched a kind of some groups and some activists, but like on the whole, it just disappeared, like, so there was a sense of these connections, of the solidarity of an actual organized political movement. And, most of it was happening online, for the election. And so when the election, or when the campaign ended and the election ended, it also disappeared. And so a lot of these social media platforms, they're kind of great, for media people. They're very good for media people, especially in the sort of neoliberal age when there are no jobs anymore for journalists. And so they allow journalists like us to make money and to make at least a bit of a living. But I think they're actually pretty bad for politics, for like real politics, where it's all about actual physical networks of people, connecting. And so because there isn't anything like that really in America. And so, I'm in a way glad that like there's going to be an evolution of these of the way that we see these social media platforms, because I think it's a good thing, because not that many years ago, like people still saw Facebook and Twitter in almost utopian terms, like they were able to, connect people across cultures, foster communication, foster dialogue, and it was all about, people believed in this kind of openness. And over the last 4 years, really, since Donald Trump got elected, that utopian idea of the internet started to be eroded. And, with the idea that the internet now suddenly can be used to attack America by these foreign actors, quote unquote actors. I don't know why they call them actors. It's
Actors.
such a fucking,
They're not humans, they're actors.
It's such a horrible fucking term. But yeah, and so starting with Russiagate and all these conspiracies about the internet suddenly being used to harm America, people started kind of backpedaling and started to evaluate what the internet is about, and of course it helped elect Donald Trump. And so people have taken a kind of started taking a darker view of the internet, and it's kind of ramping up now, right? I mean, especially with now, it's like the internet is this dangerous network that needs to be controlled, that needs to have safeguards for the sake of democracy. The democracy needs to be saved from openness, essentially. And so, I mean, there's an evolution of the way that people relate to these technologies, and I think and there's, of course, now the cancellations are a lot more visible now, whereas most people probably didn't think about them. Now that you have like these sort of the head of state, American president being canceled, this is another kind of realization that's happening about these platforms. I mean, we've on the left, people have kind of known about this for much longer, but this realization is evolving, and I don't necessarily think it's such a horrible thing. I mean, in the sense that, like, you kind of want to know what this technology is about, like who are the people that control it, what is their power, right? And we are beginning to see that power being displayed a lot more publicly and a lot more brazenly by these companies, and so I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because at least it shows sort of the nature, the reality of these platforms, that they aren't neutral, that they aren't just open to anybody, that there are, that there's control over these platforms, and it's pretty much unaccountable control, at least democratically unaccountable control. And so I'm kind of, I'm trying to see a sort of a silver lining here, because I don't think these platforms are really our friends, regardless of whether or not they're kicking us off,
Yeah.
and so yeah, I'm a lot more cynical about this stuff than I think a lot of other people.
No, I mean, I think that I think many people are becoming cynical, like you're saying. And I think with what's really strange to watch, not strange, but like, it's just gross to see this kind of cheering on of the censorship, and it's arbitrary, or maybe not arbitrary. It's like, it's not transparent. Like, it's not like we're being given like a list of criteria for what people get kicked off for. We're just seeing like a purge of accounts, and all these liberals are cheering. And at this point, it's not just that they're arms of the government. It's kind of like they become arms of the Democratic Party.
Totally.
And
Yeah, and I just saw, like, yesterday, I think on Twitter, there's this like account. It's pretty popular. It's like, it's like some kind of left-wing account that calls itself Jewish Worker, and it's like, anti-Zionist, Jewish, sort of anonymous account that's, I don't know, posts a lot, and has a lot of followers. I actually don't know who they are, but like they were making the case. It's like they were basically begging Apple and Google, Android, to like ban Telegram off their
what?
basically, because they're saying that all these Nazis are going in there and going to be organizing on Telegram. So we must make Apple and Google enforce their own terms of service contracts. And it's like, are you, like, this is just insane. You're like a left-wing account that's begging, like, and Telegram is actually kind of, it's made by this Russian guy, and it's like, it's the number one platform for independent journalism in Russia, for instance, because journalists use they have this kind of almost like Twitter like kind of feature that's built into the platform, and it's really popular, not just in Russia, all around the world. And so and like it's big in Iran, and like, so this account is like, this left-wing account is begging these monopolies to kick off this platform that's used by millions and millions of Russian people, and
Well, Russians, I
like
think that's
Russian
your
journalists. Yeah,
problem is you're viewing Russians as people.
exactly. I'm sorry. Yeah, I won't make that mistake again. But like you see this stuff all over the place. So it's not just like liberals, but supposed leftists are making these they're begging these fucking corporations to censor even more platforms, because they break their terms of service and all this stuff. It's a weird thing to watch. But again, like, I don't know, the more that we realize that the internet and the social media companies are like AT&T or like some other horrible, telecommunications monopoly, the better we are for it. Like no one has like, I don't know. It's like the way that people approached these social media companies for years, as if they're like different. They're not, as if they kind of stand above the world and are neutral and are just provide these neutral platforms for us to communicate and for us to share ideas, regardless of, where we stand in the political spectrum. It's just always, it was always a kind of a utopian, bankrupt idea, but people held it, and it was, held wide sway. And so I think the more that we realize that Twitter and Facebook are no different than, I don't know, AT&T or Comcast, the better we are for it. And so it's like, it's good to shed your illusions.
Well, let me ask, since you have this knowledge, I know you were talking about the fact that you felt you might have to write a short history of Section 230.
Yeah.
And I'll just quote you. You said it's become an all-purpose liability mega cloaking device for our tech overlords. And we've heard a lot about this provision. It's been talked about. It's been obviously singled out as something that needs to be abolished. I think Donald Trump wanted to. Well, I know he did. He tried to cram it in the Republicans crammed it into the NDAA bill and tried to. I think they wanted to get it passed that way through that massive spending bill that they pass every single year to serve the military-industrial complex. So, I mean, obviously you can fill a couple hours talking about this, but just basically, why do you say this? Why do you think that this is something we could just do away with?
I think doing away with it, I'm not saying that we should do away with it 100%, but it should be definitely rewritten or amended. Because, I mean, look, without getting into too many of the specifics, and I will write about it this soon, because I think it's an important and, like kind of vastly misunderstood and law, or a part of a law that remains on the books, because most of the law that it's embedded in actually has been struck down as unconstitutional. But over the years, basically 230 protects like sort of telecommunications platforms, like back in the day when the law was passed in 1996. It was like internet providers like AOL and Prodigy and CompuServe and stuff like that, right? So they had like bulletin boards that people could post stuff onto, and so the law kind of shielded them from liability and encouraged them to actually take a bigger take a more active role in actually moderating and curating the content that was published on these platforms. But it protected them from liability, and said that they're actually not a publisher of the content, right? They can't be sued for the content that's published on their platforms, right? But what's happened over the years is that the courts have interpreted this law to basically grant blanket immunity to tech companies from any liability for things that happen on their platforms. And so in a way, it's almost there's two parts to this. On one hand, the law did grant immunity, but in a kind of a narrower sense of that. But the courts after that have interpreted it in the widest possible sense, basically giving protecting Amazon from products that like potentially explode and cause harm to people, right? And that are like that are advertised. There's like misinformation in advertising on these Amazon listings, because Amazon is not like a seller of this stuff. It's just a platform that connects buyers and sellers. So it protects these giant companies from liability that goes well beyond the kind of the stated intentions of that law. And so and so I think 230 has given um, Silicon Valley so that this blanket huge liability protection from anything, and no other industry enjoys such protection right currently. Not the newspaper industry, not the oil industry, uh, nothing. And so they have right now they enjoy protections that is not enjoyed by any other industry. It's a huge subsidy to these companies,
Mm.
and it is a kind of a and it's it seeks to be addressed, this blanket liability. I don't know why they should have this blanket liability when no one else does, and no business should have this kind of blanket liability protection from anything that they do, from any kind of corporate activity that they cause harm. It could be isn't just like defamatory, or isn't just defamation or things like that, but like actually bodily harm to people. So that's kind of the problem with this law. Yeah.
And then, so obviously, I don't want to give more credit to Democrats. I'm not here to boost them, but as we go forward into the Biden years, I wanted to know if you had any reaction to this bit here, because it does seem clear that Democrats can't claim ignorance. They know of all of these issues. In fact, there's people in Congress who are actually been working on uh, the looking and examining Apple, Facebook, Google, and Amazon, and looking at their monopolistic behaviors. I just wanted to point out here, if you don't mind, I'm going to take a minute here to read that there was this report that the House of Representatives released last year, back in October, that basically lays out, almost everything that I think all three of us would agree on. And this is the conduct. So it says that they studied their business practices and found that, quote, each platform now serves as a gatekeeper over a key channel of distribution. By controlling access to markets, these giants can pick winners and losers throughout our economy. They not only wield tremendous power, but they also abuse it by charging exorbitant fees, imposing oppressive contract terms, and extracting valuable data from people and businesses that rely on them. And then they continue. Each platform uses its gatekeeper position to maintain its market power. By controlling the infrastructure of the digital age, they have surveilled other businesses to identify potential rivals and have ultimately copied or cut off their competitive threats. Then lastly, they say
Hmm.
the firms abuse their role as intermediaries to further entrench and expand its, whether through self-financing, predatory pricing, or exclusionary conduct. The dominant platforms have exploited their power to become even more dominant. So obviously, I don't really think they're going to do anything about this, but we
Yeah.
have Democrats, at least, who recognize that this is the problem. And I guess as we look forward to the Biden years and the way Silicon Valley is going to have tremendous influence, how do you think they handle the fact that they are, like they can't claim to not be self-aware of how monopolistic these companies are? And we, like all of us people in media who are going to do journalism, and
Yeah.
to the extent that is possible, we're going to push out stories about the way in which they're engaged in censorship, or they're trying to destroy other competitors that people might want to use. So, I mean, do you have any and I guess maybe appealing to your accelerationist side, I mean, where do you see politics going in order to deflect the fact that something has to be done about these monopolies?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's a good question. I don't have any special insight into this, unfortunately. I mean, e- yeah. I mean, it seems that like there might be a kind of some kind of um, Microsoft level kind of attempt to break up these platforms into component parts. I don't know if that would actually greatly improve um, our experience as sort of end users of these platforms. I mean, I don't know how they would handle, I mean, like there's a couple of different things that's in that statement that you read. I mean, they are gatekeepers. They are they can sort of have unilateral action and influence culture and politics by blocking certain things, and also business by basically squashing their competition and things like that. So I don't know. There's a lot of different aspects to it. I mean, are they talking about just breaking up, like there's some breaking up Facebook into sort of component things, like breaking out Instagram or separating Facebook from its advertising business, or separating Google from its advertising business? I just don't know, and it's hard to tell because, as you know, there's a lot of kind of the good policy papers and the good proposals that are being put out by Democratic administrations and Democrats in general that never get really implemented in any sort of way, or get watered down as they go along. And so it's hard for me to say. I wouldn't be surprised if over the next 4 years, or over the next 8 years, or there would be calls to break up and limit sort of the monopoly power of some of these platforms. I don't know how that would fit into the larger anti-monopolist movement, and whether or not that would apply to companies like Amazon, or that it would just be limited to social media companies or telecommunication kind of Silicon Valley companies like Google and Facebook and Twitter, and maybe even, to some degree, Apple, because it has control through its app store about which apps are allowed and which apps aren't. So I don't know. These are all questions that we'll have to kind of see as the Biden administration gets geared up and starts kind of steaming along there. I wouldn't be surprised if there was something that would be attempted in that regard.
Well, I know we have to start.
I don't hold much hope for this. I mean, it's like, because look, it's like to go against. I mean, or I can see kind of a limited attack on this, because I don't see a broad attack on monopoly power in America by the Biden administration. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something. But I don't see him as like a big anti-monopolist.
No, and no one's really making that a big platform. No one's
like monopoly break. Yeah, he didn't. It wasn't something that was discussed.
Not just him,
really.
Like Democrats in general, like even
no.
That's not how they attack it. No, they attack it from decorum and civility, and how you have to keep things polite, and we're going to be bipartisan. I think the thing that worries me, and I bet Rania would have something to say after I make this point, is I'm tremendously concerned at how, as an opposition force now, the right wing will be able to take these issues and make them theirs in order to wield their own political power, in order to mobilize people. Like, I can see people using this as a way to bring people together around certain issues, like saying, okay, well, they're not going to speak to the material conditions. They're not going to fight for programs that can help working people, but they could say your voice is being suppressed and taken down from these platforms, and you need to rise up and fight against Silicon Valley.
Right.
For sure. No, and they're definitely going to do that. And you can already see them doing it. I'm surprised they didn't do it more under Trump. I mean, there was just the beginnings of this stuff. The attorney generals of all these different sort of Republican states were, launched this kind of probe into Google. Yeah, I totally agree that's going to happen, and they're obviously going to do it in some kind of fucked up way. But they're going to definitely, if they do it, they're going to definitely bring a lot of people over to their side. And you can tell by the kind of viral nature of the people who write about this attack on freedom of speech and the attack on democracy. Like you see, like Glenn Greenwald's columns about this stuff. He's churning those things out like one of those a minute, it seems like, and they're really popular. I mean, so and they're popular in this kind of bipartisan way, actually. And so they appeal to people on the right, and they appeal to be on the kind of the, I don't know, on the skeptic kind of liberal side of it. And so it's a huge issue. It has a lot of cultural significance in America. I mean, freedom of speech, all this stuff. They're definitely going to use it. It'd be stupid not to, but the right is also weird, because they're like, don't really want to attack the monopolies, so it's like they're going to do this big show of it, and they're not going to they're not really gonna, follow through with it. So it's going to be, again, like political theater, and probably effective political theater. without much to show for it. And Trump's attack on the 230 is kind of interesting because that law is kind of interesting because what it did, what originally as written, it was actually written to encourage platform providers to moderate content. So it would remove liability from content providers that moderated their content. So because once you moderate content or change it, you become a publisher, right? And so that provision was about saying that even if you moderate the stuff that's on a forum and you kind of delete things that you find are problematic for whatever reason, you don't automatically become a publisher. You're still just a neutral transmitter of information. And so I think that Trump's people are actually interpreting Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act in the originalist written version of that law. And so that's why I'm kind of circling back to what I was talking about earlier, which is that they're using this kind of originalist, they're using this law, I don't know, lift immunity from companies like Facebook and Twitter, and make them liable for some kind of maybe damage that they caused based on their sort of moderation and their censorship of content. It's pretty interesting because but yeah, so that kind of stuff they're gonna try to do that, I guess, more. I don't know, but I don't see them being very effective at it because they don't care. They don't mind monopolies. They don't mind concentrated corporate power. So what can we expect from these people?
All right. Well,
it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good.
I can say whatever happens, Rania, you, me, Yasha, we're all going to feel like there's some legitimacy to some of these arguments that the right wing put forward. And we're going to be like, oh, no matter what, there's going to be this swift effort to cancel us if we open our mouths.
To me, also what it shows is just how weak or non-existent the left in America is, that we're not even a part of the conversation. We literally are, and when I say we, I mean the umbrella term for left. We're literally just a group of people
on Twitter,
shouting on Twitter, some on YouTube, right? No, with our Patreons and Substacks and stuff like that. And it's we're not a coherent movement in any way, shape, or form. We're just fighting and eating each other all the time.
But for good reason. But that goes to my earlier point about that these platforms are actually a problem for the quote unquote left, is because they give us a sense of something, that they give us a fraudulent sense of that a left actually exists. Meanwhile, if you just step outside of your apartment or whatever, or your mansion, and you look outside and you're like, where is the left? It doesn't exist. And so without actual physical political movement.
Didn't you hear that 1,500 people joined the DSA after the Capitol was stormed?
That's not a lot.
No, they were no, it was actually sad. They tweeted about it like we got 1,500 new members. This is big, you guys. And I'm just this is really sad.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Exactly. It's in some places the DSA is stronger than others. I guess in New York, it's fairly active.
Local, they have some.
I mean, again, you have to look at the physical, but I agree. I mean, the idea that there's a national movement, and or anything, that agrees on anything or actually has any power. I mean, look, it doesn't exist on the ground. And here in LA, where I am right now, there are some amazing people who do amazing work. Some of them are connected to the DSA, others aren't, but they're but it's just, a lot of it is, trying to very basic, organizing people around tenants issues, and it's so small, so tiny, even though that it has no support really, mass support. I mean, not even I don't know, micro support from the population, it's microscopic, despite the fact that so many people are behind on rent and facing eviction. Such an important issue is it's almost impossible to even organize around that or to create a movement, but people are trying. And so I applaud them for it. And they're doing important work, but there is just nothing here. And it's LA is one of the major cities in America. There's nothing here. I mean, it's just absolutely nothing. It's a barren wasteland. And so the idea that either the left or whatever, can influence any kind of politics at the national level. That it's delusional. Actually, it's kind of weird. It's like, and what keeps society alive, this delusion, is social media.
Yeah.
Because it allows us to sort of create this little bubble for ourselves, and we can engage in it, and we can have these fights, and we have audiences that listen to us, and all this stuff. But like in reality, it's all it's like media frothing of the media, and a lot of it is important and is educational. I mean, like the stuff that that you've been doing on Assange. I mean, it's like it's really important work, and it's not. I'm not trying to like downgrade some of the stuff that we're doing, but a lot of it is kind of useless, and a lot of it is just kind of entertainment and kind of crisis entertainment and
Yeah, I think that
conflicts and all this stuff, and so it's the way it is. It's just the
and
reality.
you mentioned how the Bernie Sanders movement sort of like encapsulated that whole idea of like social media activism
Yeah.
and how it like evaporated once it was over. And I think that campaign in particular maybe gave a lot of us, including myself, I think, a false sense of like overinflated importance, like a false
Yes.
sense of your level of importance in the political sphere.
Yeah.
Because it felt like, oh my God, this guy could really be president.
No, I
And,
even
like,
believed it towards the end. As cynical as I am, like I like it, yeah, like in, I don't know, like towards January, I guess, like January, December, January, then February. It's like I was like, whoa, this guy there's a chance. If I'm like, no way, but maybe, yeah. And of course, it all like fizzled. I mean, in a way, if you remember, like Arab Spring movements, they're similar in a way. I mean, they're different, but they were the first ones to really kind of like instrumentalize and use these social media platforms to like bring a lot of people out together. A huge tent of activists from all sorts of walks of life and faiths and like the secular with the religious and so and in the end, like when they were able to get something done, but like it also how they ended showed the total kind of
no, they also had an
the
the internet gave them an overinflated sense of
exactly.
their power. Even if they came out in big numbers, they
And
still weren't
yeah.
organized in any coherent fashion enough to be able to take on like state military dictatorships the way
Yeah,
they felt they
exactly.
could,
Exactly. And
right?
so in the end, the organized power won over, and to control, even though they were effective for a time being, and it did effectively, affect political change. But like they had there is this kind of virtual quality to them, and they're really good for bringing people out, but they're not really good for political organizing, And I think that's what I aim. That's what I aim. I mean, but you and I know that like we're all going to be canceled at some point, with the way that things are
Yeah.
trending. I mean, it's just going to happen. Like, I mean, I think. I mean,
I wake up some days like
I
being
mean,
like, do I still have a Twitter account?
I mean, like for whatever reason, we're going to be. It's. I mean, I expect that to happen. I mean, maybe it won't. Maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised. But in the end, like I don't know. It's like maybe just because I'm just so like overdosed on virtual content, political content through Twitter and Facebook. I mean, I think we all are. That I'm just completely down on it. But I mean, I think without like again, like I'm just going to hammer the same point. Without a local politics, without a local political organization of some kind that can then grow into something bigger and link up with other like-minded political movements and political organizations around the country and then around the world, like how else can you expect to wield power, or have any sort of influence? And so you can win elections, and you can like kind of you can do these kind of mass movements through Facebook to win elections, probably, but they're also going to be very like we see with the squad, it's going to be, they're going to not really reflect necessarily I mean, I don't even know what the interests of the squad's constituency is, like, I mean, I don't know if they're like all far left people who really want to end the empire. I don't think so, like, and so I bet you they actually
squad is
pretty,
just like a word for people of color in Congress under a certain age.
yeah,
Like it
exactly.
kind
So
of there's not even a coherent political ideology other than maybe like universal health care or something.
yeah, maybe, right? I mean, but they're like grouped as one thing, or they're, and I don't even know what what are the politics of the constituency that elected AOC. I mean, I know that there are like some like there's I actually don't know, but I would be I'd be I would be surprised if it was, very left wing.
Yeah, I
or like,
also think it's a bit of a tangent. I also think it's a bit overinflated to think that like people are like AOC is going to be president, and I'm like, just because
Yeah.
she won like a small district in Brooklyn doesn't
yeah,
mean she can win a country. Like it's like that's what I mean. That's a good point. Another excellent example of like the sort of overinflated
yeah,
importance that online gives to certain people and like a celebrity status kind of way that might not be reflected
yeah,
like on
yeah.
the
No,
ground.
it's
Yeah.
Well,
so we got to look past the social media stuff, and just past these things and like look at, which is pretty hard. I mean, it's organizing. I mean, we've almost like, I don't even know we're like good at organizing around like an issue. Like you have an issue, it's like, Medicare for all, and like you like gather support, but then like, like, I don't know, like what are the interests that like align me? I don't know. Am I the only one in the States now,
Well,
or Kevin, you're also in the States?
no, I'm still in the States.
Okay. So I
I
don't
think
know, I don't know,
later.
what it
I think
combines. I don't know
later.
what neighborhood you live in or what city you live in, but like I don't know what like like what things in common you have with your neighbors, for instance. Like can you
Yeah.
even have a political conversation with them about anything?
Well,
Like that
probably not a
is
whole lot when we're all isisolated and not seeing each other during a pandemic and
yeah.
like told to like keep space and not really
Yes.
interact. I think that you make a good point here. We can wrap up our conversation. We've been going for more than an hour, including some of the tech hiccups that we had along the way. But I, I think what you're saying is really important here about the kind of delusion that we are fed by having our presence on these tech companies' platforms and how so much of our organizing we're attempting through them. Because when you think to the last decade, almost everything that is organizing owes its success to the delusion of believing it was going to succeed because
Mm-hmm.
you thought you had the numbers. Like
Yeah.
Occupy, like the Occupy
Yes.
movement is a great example of like, here we think this is what we need to do. We have so many people,
We
everyone
have the
around the country.
99%. We've got 99% of the people.
Yeah, yeah.
That wasn't thinking.
Um, I think Black Lives Matter to a lesser degree, but it still has
Mm.
elements of that.
Oh yeah.
But at least with that, you have some groups that are mainly composed of Black people who are already doing organizing offline
Yep.
that come into the fold. But I think then they get swept up into the net centric nature of
Mm-hmm.
organizing, and then it just falters in less than
Yeah.
a year. And it doesn't. And actually, there are two eras of Black Lives Matter. There's 2014
Interesting.
after Mike Brown in
Mm-hmm.
Ferguson, and then
Mm-hmm.
there's this latest iteration
For the
with
George Floyd.
which has more ruling elite support, but it's
Mm-hmm.
mostly just to co-opt that energy.
No, totally. No, the right here, just down the street, there's a 7-Eleven from my apartment here, and there's this kind of like bus stop there where there's actually a black homeless guy that kind of hangs out a lot of the time, and it's like such a perfect thing. Like after the Black Lives Matter happened here, all over LA, you'd have Amazon, Netflix, all the platforms like supporting Black Lives Matter, and so like here you actually had like this guy sleeping on the bench on this bus stop, and there's a poster that a Netflix poster that says, Black Lives
God.
Matter, Black Trans Lives Matter,
You're
like
kidding.
going down the list. And there's actually like a black homeless, life. It doesn't matter, So it's like, it
Same
was
thing
such
in
a,
DC. Same thing in
it's
DC.
such
I
a
know exactly the
crazy,
poster
it's
you're
so
talking about.
cynical. I don't know. It's really
It,
fucked up. And
it was
so
the same
that,
thing.
yeah. And so
No, no.
exactly like Black Lives Matter was pretty interesting because watching it in real time and people could get, again, swept up, again, sitting at home and get like swept up in this, and they got flooded with donations. Like, I mean, such an incredible amount of money flowed to some of these organizations. Like an organization that I kind of was at the very beginning of the pandemic, I was kind of involved a little bit, but I kind of quickly lost touch with them. They were trying to set up try to get this movement going about pressuring the local government to stop evictions, to like basically to put homeless people into empty hotels and to like cancel like rent, basically, right? So, and like they were they're like partnering with some existing Black Lives Matter organizations that exist in LA and stuff like that, and they were trying to get people out to protest in front of the mayor's office, and it's like they put out calls on social media, and there'd be like I don't know, like 24 people would come to protest like for this big thing, no rent, cancel rent, no evictions, and put homeless people into hotels, to protect them during the pandemic. It's such an important thing. 60% of the people in LA rent, and they get no traction. There'd be like, they're
That's
like a
so
shoestring budget.
crazy.
Totally
It's
crazy.
like
And
such
then
a
and
big
then when Black Lives Matter hit, like they got like and they were part of, they were part of the coalition that was sort of supported this. They got like just like drowned in money. Like it was just like it was like one of those, it's like one of those, like things where like you actually like a truck comes out and just buries you in gold, like that's what happened. And it's like, so it's such a weird thing, and it's totally virtual, like none of those people actually would come out to support anything. So it's like liberal guilt kind of like donations, I think, for the most part. I mean, not I don't think but it was kind of interesting to watch. It's like the things that actually affect, I don't know, there's like the kind of economic aspect of it, that don't kind of fit into the kind of the sort of like, I don't know, maybe, I don't know if it's the right word to call it, but like a kind of a liberal culture war framework, which Black Lives Matter does kind of fit into, and is co-opted in this kind of like liberal culture war. Like just to see like the reality of like, okay, we're trying to organize people here for local issues here in LA. It's like crickets. And as soon as it's sort of like online, the outrage machine that was kind of fed by this Black Lives Matter movement at the time, like during the pandemic, like it just generated so much interest. And like you could see it in like like, again, it's the virtual nature of it. And then like the kind of the popular eye kind of moved on, and it just
Yeah.
like, and again, it was like down to like nothing, and so yeah, these things are
Like it never happened.
extremely, yeah, like exactly. And so like, and leaving in its wake, you have these posters from Netflix, caring about Black lives. And
Yeah.
it's like, and so yeah, totally. I mean, look, we live in a world, generally speaking, dominated by oligarchs and spies, and like national security interests. And so like the fact that the internet is like that, and the fact that the internet is the internet is also dominated by oligarchs and spies and the military, like it's not surprising. And the fact that it's going to sort of like that's the system is going to act in whatever, like in its own self-interest, whatever that interest is, like it also shouldn't be surprising. And so until we have some kind of political control over these things, which we're not going to have, if we don't have any political movements on the ground in reality, then we're kind of like, we're just passengers, we're like end users of this stuff. And we can complain about it. We can appeal to Jack, directly to unblock you or to like restore your account, which is basically what is
Well,
now
we
happens,
always
right?
do what happened. No, that's
That's basically what happens. I mean, so you get like, and sometimes it works, right? And like, and I mean, you really have to appeal to the king. Like, it's like you appeal to the king to like to hear your your problem, and to maybe solve it directly. And it's funny, like in Russia, it's like a yearly thing that happens. People do try to appeal to Putin, because if you catch his attention, like he'll kind of like he'll solve your fucking problem. He'll cut through the red tape immediately. Like,
We're not so
and like
different from Russia.
it's like we live in that kind of world. And so like it should be surprising that, and I mean, we can talk about it, we can discuss it, we can sort of parse it, and it is important to do that. But I think it's also like just kind of, yeah, it kind of makes me angry, and it's because we just are so powerless, and
Yeah.
it's like, how long can we talk about this stuff without actually doing something, and that doing is going to be pretty difficult. It's we won't be able to storm the Capitol building, unfortunately, and fix all our
Well,
problems.
the cops won't let us in if we try to.
Exactly.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
thanks for coming on the show. Would you like to plug your newsletter so people?
Oh yeah. Well, sure. Yeah. If people want, they can check me out at Immigrants as a Weapon. It's on Substack, of course. Yasha.substack.com. Check it out.
And it's really good. I read all your stuff and I really
Thanks.
like it.
Thanks.
You're quite a prolific, I guess I just like the way you add your like spicy takes is fun.
Oh, that's awesome.
Go check out
I got
Yasha's
a double spicy takes. Yeah. No, I'll tell you what I should do it more often, because it actually annoys me. Like, there's an ecosystem like that's been built up like in this, I don't even know what age we're in now, like, but like, this sort of pyramid ecosystem of sort of like left and alt media kind of it's all built around like your kind of your branding or your name and your sort of celebrity status in this kind of system. And there's like this pyramid that with a lot of people that have a lot of influence at the top, and like and within the system, almost no one wants to criticize each other, because it's like I guess people are like don't want to go against people who, I mean, a lot of people are kind of friends and have been around, the same kind of movements, but also there's like a kind of a business incentive that's built into this. You kind of want to like, because like the people who have less subscribers don't want to piss off the people who have a lot of subscribers because they hope that they're going to get, kind of promoted and all this stuff. So like one thing that I am doing more is actually kind of looking at our own little media ecosystem that we've built for ourselves, this insular ecosystem. And I think there's a kind of a lot of problems with it. It's promising. It's like, I know there's a lot of opportunism there and a lot of entrepreneurialism there and a lot of bullshit and a lot of selling like sort of entertainment as politics, as radical politics. And so if you want to hear more about that, maybe you should.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that you do those kinds of things because you're right. People don't want to criticize each other.
No.
They certainly don't want to criticize the big players who are raking in like a lot.
Huge amounts of money.
I mean, just like unfathomable. There's like that handful that just manages to like,
The top Substack people now are making like, I mean, over $1 million a year. It's like it's pretty nuts.
Insane. Yeah, that's insane. I mean, yeah, there's like that's the thing. There's a few people that are making that kind of money.
Yeah.
And it's not even about like necessarily the personalities or them as people. It's more just like I do appreciate that because I think you're onto something. And we've talked about it on our show before. It's more about the ecosystem that's been created, and actually what it does to us as media people and journalists is it pushes us into these boxes of actually having to be entertainers.
Yeah.
Like I make TikToks. Like it's fun. I guess I kind of enjoy it. It's not the main thing I want to be doing.
Yeah.
But like that's what the corner I'm being pushed into is like bringing people into politics through entertainment, and I actually think that's really unhealthy.
I mean, yeah, it's no different than MSNBC in a lot of ways because MSNBC sort of positions, it is entertainment. It's like sort of crisis entertainment. It's outrage entertainment. It's like getting people hooked on whatever the the latest kind of whatever the scare campaign is at the moment, and it's it's worked, and Trump has been great for them in that sense, and they just kind of feed them that outrage and that they're chasing that news cycle, and they're creating the news cycle themselves actually, and like the left media world actually kind of like tacks onto that as well and creates its own news cycles and its own sort of like boom, like periods of like unrest and kind of war, and like in promoting the heroes and promoting like the kind of the evil guys and the good guys and like but like always keeping that churn and like keeping people kind of glued to this crisis thing. Like, so yeah, it's a problem because I mean, again, it distracts from I don't know, like if maybe people maybe don't want to be political actually in life, and it is hard. Where do you start? It's like the ground has been completely scoured of anything around us. So it's like you have to build from scratch whatever the political movements that hopefully will at some point spring into action. So I totally understand people going into this total virtual entertainment world for their to get their political fix, but it's not politics, and selling it as politics, and selling it as if like being outraged all the time about something will actually change anything,
right,
is also a problem. So yeah, it's and making huge amounts of money while so many people suffer, and so many people are poor, like making like just obscene amounts of money and like presenting yourself as like one of the people, and like I think I would be embarrassed if I was making the amount of money that some of these people make while writing about the people and what's best for the people. It's like it's kind of embarrassing. How do you do that without like being called out? But that's the reality of our ecosystem.
On the flip side, I mean, I can't, like, for me, I can't really personally be upset that somebody's making like it's annoying to me on a level of like man, I wish I had that kind of financial stability. Like an envious aspect, but it's I mean, like I can't really get mad at those people so much as like I'm more like why I think it's really damaging to the future of journalism and to journalism now, because there's no money in journalism. There's only money in making and commentary.
There's no
and entertainment.
journalism. They're not doing journalism,
Yeah,
actually.
no, these people, but I'm just saying, like, it's like in the left media ecosystem, there did actually used to be a bit more money for journalism and reporting, and
Yeah,
that's like non-existent anymore. And now, if you want to be involved in politics from like that sort of like analytical commentary level,
yeah,
like you do it by having a YouTube channel where you shout, or you
yes,
do it by, and then like anybody who wants to come up in that's the only way you can really make money is just going to
yeah,
copy those things. And it's like, and one thing I think that you made a really good point about is they all just start copying each other. Like it's like a bunch of like identical views and just different styles. Maybe the personalities are slightly different, but it's
yeah.
just the same thing regurgitated over and over
No,
again.
it's like I'll tell you, like if you take a look at like
Repackaged.
Glenn Greenwald's account or something, Substack account, and like you take a look at Matt Taibbi's Substack account, they're almost like identical. They're part of the same news cycle. It's pretty weird actually if you look at them. They kind of follow the same stories. They follow. It's always like the same kind of
So
cycles.
there's like 2 or 3 of everyone. Like it's
Yeah,
like there's
and then they have each other on their podcast and all this stuff. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We're probably going over time, but yeah,
Yeah.
subscribe and support journalism. And yeah, like a
Normally
good
the
investigative
pause doesn't
journalism is not going to
become
make money on Substack. You know, it's
no,
going to be very
yeah.
because journalism takes a lot of time. It's really resource intensive. So yeah, it's not going to.
I'll just close with the most important question here. Was there a point on MSNBC when they realized they weren't going to be able to read Trump tweets anymore?
Yeah, they have like a meltdown in the boardroom. Like,
I
oh
know,
shit.
I know, right? Like maybe Maddow broke down crying again.
We got to call Jack and get him back on.
Yeah, she's gonna be the one tweeting at Jack. Please, Jack.
That's pretty funny, actually. Maybe they should have restricted him and allowed him like one tweet per week or something, you know?
Well, they had
Just like to keep the
the
thing going.
arrangement when it was
Yeah.
just like we were going to put a disclaimer under everything that told you it was just flat out bullshit. Like,
Yeah.
that
No,
was,
I know he's been so good for business. Like I can't imagine. I mean, look, what kind of scares me about the the Biden era and like the return to normalcy or whatever that we're supposed to be experiencing pretty soon, is like what is going to be the thing that drives like the news cycle. You know, who is like the baddie? Like who is the bad guy? Who are the evil doers? You know, like
Chinese.
it's gonna be the Chinese, it's gonna be the Russians most likely still. So like they're gonna move away from Trump. I guess maybe they're gonna like do stuff about QAnon, maybe. Like, I mean, what I don't know what your predictions are for like the bad guys of the post-Trump era.
That's a really good question.
Like, because Trump has been like just such a fucking gold mine for these people. I mean, it's been the best 4 years for journalism, for the establishment journalism, and for like these establishment book publishing. I mean, it's like record-breaking book sales, record-breaking views for MSNBC and CNN. Like,
That's gonna go
so like,
away.
yeah.
That's
So what are
totally
they like? Because like, what are they gonna do? Like, are they having a conversation right now? I mean, I'm sure they are.
They were like failing enterprises before Trump came along.
Exactly.
Like
Like
they had
they're
like nobody was watching them. Their YouTube views were shit. And then
yeah.
Trump came along and like also the
No,
algorithm helped.
I mean,
But
it'd be interesting to know like what, I mean, the Chinese definitely, but like you got
but
to
it won't
have
be
them
as
attacking
exciting.
America. Yeah.
You can't captivate liberals by being like China, China, China. It doesn't
I don't
also have the
know,
same
actually.
well, it doesn't have the same quality to it as like Russia because like China was never as big as a part of like the Cold War propaganda as Soviet Union was.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the same like memory or the same instinctive like fear and hatred that Russia does for liberals in America. And then
Yeah.
also like it's just too I don't know, it's just not that exciting. Like what are they going to be like horrified by trade, by tariffs? Like
Well, no, I'll tell you what there's going to be.
they're
They're
going
going
to
to
turn tariffs into excitement?
they'll
Like,
take they could take the Trump kind of line or the Bannon line, basically about protecting American workers from an American industry from Chinese takeover, right? Like this is and blaming all what's happening in America on China, essentially. Like the kind
yeah,
of
but
the deindustrialization. Yeah.
it's not going to be as much of like they're just not gonna have as much viewership. Like not as many people are gonna tune in to hear that.
Yeah.
It's not as exciting as like the president's being impeached and Ukraine gate and Russia gate and
Yeah.
like Trump has a PP tape and like all the crazy shit that happened the last
So
4
basically, it's like
years.
this: if you own any like CNN stock or any
I would move
whatever
that.
MSNBC stock, like yeah, just get out of it. Yeah, sell them now before they.
All right.
Put
Come
it
on.
something else.
Let's sign off here.
All right. Thanks for having me on. It was fun.
Thank you so much, Yasha. We really appreciate it.
Bye. Thanks.